He's the best there is at what he does.
But what I do isn't very nice.
Wolverine is a character for the ages. With his indestructible skeleton, razor-sharp claws, and animalistic rage, he's remained a fan favorite with his debut in The Incredible Hulk issue 181. He's a berserker, a samurai, an escape experimentee with many years behind him. He's been through hell and back, literally, and still remains true to his heroic, if not insanely violent, virtues. We all know how incredible Hugh Jackman was as the Canadian brawler. He had the fire, the swagger, and the ferocity that made his breakout role one of the biggest in comic book movie history. There are few people who can take up and embody a role so fully. Robert Downey Jr., Ryan Reynolds, Jon Bernthal, and of course Hugh do this well. But an era has ended. A few, in fact. And as hard as it is, it's time to imagine what we want from the next embodiment of our beloved Canuck. Now that the X-Men are part of the MCU, the possibilities are endless as to how mutants are officially introduced into the story. But it has to be done right, and it has to be done differently. We know what Fox can do. They've pushed out a handful of great X-Men stories, Logan being at the tippity top, of course. But that's the thing. Why was Logan so successful, so poignant, and so heart-wrenching? For starters, it took more liberties than did any other Wolverine-centered film that came before it. And it was R-rated. Wolverine is not a PG-13 character. I mean, he can be, but again, what he does isn't very nice and isn't very, pretty. There's a reason he's the Black Ops guy, the get-his-hands-dirty fighter who will do all it takes to get the job done. He knows the nasty of the world, he's been subjected to it near constantly, so he's not going to be the most amicable person on the team. I say all that to say, it's time we see the anti-hero Wolverine, and he should be built up over time, hinted at while other mutants are finally given the shine they deserve. Finally. This will give this new take on the franchise the tenure and time it needs to properly establish itself as its own contained story. By then, we'll have seen what a leader like Cyclops looks like, or what an Omega-level mutant like Storm can do, or how young mutants like Jubilee get by as pariahs of society. It'll make Logan's official introduction that much sweeter, and his interactions with said characters that much more earned. This Logan shouldn't be likable either. Not from the jump, at least. He needs to be the asshole butting heads with established team members, and not because of silly love triangles or because he's just that cool. He is just that cool, but he's also a hothead who can be a liability if he's not too careful. He's the ultimate rebel with a problem with authority and not enough of a problem with killing. That Weapon X programming needs to run deep. We need to see his ugly before we see his good. So I'd like it if he weren't exactly on the mutant side at first. Maybe he's still a cog in the machine of Team X, or as an agent of the Hand, like an enemy of the state. He needs to start off as an antagonist, and that may mean he gets in the X-Men's way from time to time. Maybe he's a threat that requires the team to up their game. He'd make a great foil for Scott, who, unlike him, follows orders, has a no-killing policy, and is loved by those around him. He would threaten everything Scott stands for, which would make his eventual integration into the team very compelling. Introductions are tricky. As a writer, you don't want to shoehorn a character into the story. That was a major complaint about Wolverine. He stole the show, even when it wasn't necessary or it didn't quite make sense. Every character has something different they bring to the team, or else they just wouldn't work. Wolverine can't carry the franchise, and he can't be the only one developing. You want to know how I'd introduce him? Just imagine Weapon X breaking into the Xavier mansion with orders to kill the professor. You don't know it's him though. He's suited up, masked, claws sheathed. He doesn't say a word. All the audience knows is there's a man here who shouldn't be as good as he is at circumventing the mansion's advanced security. He shouldn't be able to avoid the students pouring out of lecture halls and classrooms, but he is. He makes it to the professor's office, where the renowned telepath awaits him. "You're here to kill me," he says calmly. His prospective killer says nothing. And then, the claws speak for themselves. Obviously, Stabby Boy doesn't accomplish his mission, and instead feels a twinge of humanity stirring inside him for the first time in years. For the first time in years, he feels conflicted, as questions he never bothered to ask were raised by the others. Who are you? Who sent you? Why are you fighting your own kind? Take that and run with it. Anyway, I went on this tangent to say that this new storyline could be a much more cohesive and organic introduction to Wolverine's blurry and elusive past. Wolverine did this well in X2, and not so well in Origins, but we don't talk about that anymore. But I really could. Wolverine was a PG-13 character up until Logan, and maybe this new Wolverine's introduction will take place in a PG-13 movie. Which is cool, it's not really his movie. But when he does get a solo film, it's gotta be R. No exceptions. And when he rages, he needs to rage. Like, do something that would impress Hugh. People need to believe he's got an animal caged up inside him, and that there are repercussions when it breaks out. He needs to feel dangerous. Again, I defer to the masterpiece Logan, and he was well out of his prime in that movie. The man is layers, and they need to be explored, not in an overly convoluted way, and not in an overly streamlined way either. Having, say, Sabretooth taunt him about a past he doesn't know would be a great way to properly build up his and Logan's rivalry. Origins didn't really do that, and they completely botched his Weapon X origin story. Logan was not a willing participant in the program. It's literally the source of his trauma and memory loss,
You don't call, you don't write. How else am I supposed to get your attention? Feels good, doesn't it? All that rage.
To me, this new iteration of Wolverine isn't a friend. At least he doesn't start as one. He toes the line, gets jobs done. That's what's made him so beloved for so long. He has an angle, but it's not so easily seen if you don't look past the gruff and hardened exterior. This is where future movies can pull more from the source material. As fans, we know being Logan is far from easy. And when time is all you have, the suffering is bound to wear on you. Tack on a healing factor and a brooding history, and this is where we can delve into the psychology of the feral mutant. Immortality can make a man reckless, careless, aimless. These are some of the struggles Wolverine faces in the comics, and what sets him apart from his immortal teammates. The consequence of death is what keeps people in check and out of trouble. But when you don't have that, you turn into Sabretooth. And you don't want to turn into Sabretooth. But that's the thing. Logan and Victor were near indistinguishable at one point. So what changed? What made him want to turn away from his baser instincts? That's what we need to see unfold. This is also an opportunity to explore Logan's life through the years, through all the events of the last century, give or take a few decades. If done right, this can cleverly tie in with the other stories in the MCU. Maybe we can see his time fighting alongside Captain America, or his inevitable run-ins with S.H.I.E.L.D. Maybe we explore his time on Alpha Flight, or his first mission with Department H. With his character comes a rich, versatile history, and as his story unfolds, we as the audience can put the jagged pieces together. Or not at all. He isn't the most reliable storyteller, what with his memories having been manipulated. One thing I wasn't a fan of in 2013's The Wolverine was the fact that it didn't portray Wolverine as a well-traveled man who's seen many parts of the world. He wasn't that learned samurai we know from the comics, nor was he very familiar with Japanese culture, which is odd. He'd spent a great portion of his life in the land of the rising sun. Mariko was the greatest love of his life, and one of the reasons he fought hard to maintain his humanity. Yu-Gi-Oh was a seductive devil on his shoulder, who loved the side of him he insisted he kept locked away. If they ever explore that storyline, it needs to add real depth to Old Six Claws. Where Hugh's fight scenes had an almost scrappy Street Fighter flavor to them, let this new performance show us why Logan is one of the best, if not the best, martial artists of the Marvel Universe. There's a reason he's gone toe-to-toe with the Hulk, bested death itself, and has trained some of the most lethal fighters in Marvel Comics. Don't get me started. Overall, his character arc should entail him gradually coming out of the fog of being a weapon.
Peaceful thought.
Which leads to him attempting to atone for his past misdeeds. He's got a lot of blood on his hands. Some he had a choice in, and some he didn't. The X-Men should remind him of the value of having a family, and that he truly has something to fight for now. It'd be great to focus on his dynamics with certain team members. Nightcrawler, for example, ends up being one of his best friends in the comics, despite their glaring differences in creed and personality. Since he was oversaturated, we never really got to see how the others interact with him beyond the surface, so the MCU can pick up the ball that Fox dropped. Like I said earlier, develop other characters first. It all needs to be earned and organic. There's appeal in the mystery. Give folks what they want in small, appetizing doses. He doesn't need to be everywhere, and he doesn't need to do everything. Keep the audience hungry. Give the story longevity. The story feels much more real that way. Now, in terms of appearance, let's see. Hugh Jackman is a conventionally attractive, tall man. So let's flip the script. A more comic-accurate, shorter, hairier actor would absolutely play into that feral vibe. I'm not saying the next guy has to be 5'3", but shorter is definitely better, and his presence can supplement his size. Logan was never a pretty boy, but that didn't stop him from snagging the baddest girls, and it'd be interesting to have someone who isn't exactly a model play a leading role. Pretty doesn't matter much anyway when you've got a killer personality. And it goes without saying, we need the suit. We really, really, really need it. No teasing, no end credits, no deleted scene. Like, we need it in the movie. I'll tell you right now, these will be some huge shoes to fill, and it may be hard to resist comparing this new portrayal with the old one. Impossible, some may argue. Mr. Jackman has been the face of an entire franchise for nearly 20 years. There's pressure in that role, but I have faith that whoever braves the scrutinizing eyes of anticipant fans will do the character justice. The MCU is very good at building up its characters and playing with certain dynamics, so that'll be really cool to see how it handles the darker storyline. But alas, it'll be a long time before we get to see any new performance. So until then, stay safe, stay curious, and don't forget to take the leap. Thanks for watching.